Hi everybody, welcome to Ecodriver. My name is Helmut. In this video we do our real-life consumption test on the Ecodriver loop with the Jeep Compass 4xe. That's the plug-in hybrid. I do this test with an empty battery. Firstly, to find out how efficient the hybrid drivetrain works, as this is the second major factor for efficiency in PHEVs alongside battery size. And secondly, I want to show, mainly to those doubters and experts who keep on telling, or even worse believing, that plug-in hybrids are environmental monsters and use, I don't know, double the amount of fuel if they are not charged because they are so heavy and carry a battery and an electric motor around and la-di-da-di-da. Earlier today, I have done already another test. I have tried to find out how far this car can go electric only, of course when driven economically. You'll find the link in the description box below or at the end of this video. You see, the state of charge is 2%. I couldn't get any lower at the range test, so I assume that's a socket state of charge which remains untouched. The capacity of the battery is 11.4 kWh gross. The petrol engine is a 1.3 liter 4-cylinder with, in this case, 96 kilowatts, 130 horsepower. You can get the same engine with a higher power output of 132 kilowatts, 180 horsepower. The electric motor delivers 44 kilowatts, 60 horsepower, and there is a 6-speed torque converter automatic gearbox. Unladen weight is 1,835 kilograms, 4,037 pounds. This is an all-wheel drive, and that's only the plug-in hybrid. All other Compasses are two-wheel drive. The route we are doing is the same for all fuel economy tests. It starts, once we left the city limits behind us, with a 6-kilometer climb, 4 miles, of about 370 meters, 1,100 feet of altitude, followed by rolling hills, a descent, which brings us back to the starting level, 19 kilometers, 12 miles of open road, typical for this part of the world, 17 kilometers of motorway, and 18 kilometers of city traffic. After every section, we check the overall and sectoral consumption, and at the end, we analyze the results. In this car, we have the choice of different drive modes. We choose hybrid. You could switch to electric only or safe, which tries to keep the state of charge at the same level. I hope you enjoy the trip, the nice weather, and the scenery. See you later. We are now at the end of the ascent. We see here 13.2 liters per 100 kilometers. What I noticed so far, compared to other plug-in hybrids, the Compass doesn't try to charge the battery when the state of charge is very low. I'm not sure whether this is good, as there might come a point where we need the additional power, which is delivered by the electric motor, and then there is not enough juice in the battery. Other PHEVs, which delivered very good mileage in this test, do this, and I guess the charging while driving is not the worst idea in some cases. Anyhow, we will see at the end what it delivers. What I also noticed is that the petrol engine is very quiet. I barely noticed the engine running. On those kind of hills we are approaching now, in order to save energy, it's a good tactic to use the change of gradient to your advantage. If it goes down, then try to build up some momentum to go into the next hill or flatter section. And when it goes up, then slowly reduce the speed a little bit and wait with re-accelerating until it flattens or the road goes down again. Just like a roller coaster. Once the cars were brought to the highest point, it's only gravity and kinetic energy that moves the cars. At the end of the hilly section, we have 10.0 liters per 100 kilometers. What I noticed here on this section is that the switch between the modes happens very smoothly and quietly. Kudos to the engineers for this. On the way down, we benefit from the bigger battery compared to a full hybrid, as we have enough capacity to store all the regenerated energy, whereas with a full hybrid, the smaller battery would be fully charged probably before half distance. However, one thing to keep in mind is that the electric motor, with its only 44 kilowatts, will not produce enough power to brake the vehicle electrically only. This motor will produce, I guess, 32 to 34 kilowatts of regenerative power, and that means that very often the friction brakes will have to be used by the car to brake. This means that we are not able to use all the potential braking energy and therefore have less distance for electric driving gained compared to plug-in hybrids with more powerful electric motors. At the end of the descent, we have 6.9 liters per 100 kilometers. We have a state of charge of 8% and an electric range of 3 kilometers, which is not really a lot considering the distance of the descent and the altitude we have lost here. In future videos, you will see that with other PHEVs we gain 6 or 8 kilometers, as we have done with the Ford Kuga, Ford Escape. This is a sign of what I said earlier, that the regenerative capacity of the small engine is not enough to use all the energy potentially produced while braking on a descent. And because of that small electric distance, it doesn't really make sense now to save this energy for later, as we now have about 2 kilometers of 50 kilometers an hour, 30 miles per hour ahead of us. If you had more like 6 or 8 kilometers, it would definitely be useful to do so. When leaving the motorway, we see 5.9 liters per 100 kilometers. What I mentioned earlier about the petrol engine not charging the battery, I can confirm now. This car is not charging the battery while driving if not set to do so. Other PHEVs, like my Volvo, charge the battery to about 15% of its capacity to make sure you have some electric energy stored once you leave the motorway and you might need it. in city traffic, or in general when you see there is something that blocks the steady movement of the car, it's always my aim to avoid to come to a complete stop. Here, for example, I see the traffic lights ahead of us are showing red. I already start to slow down the car. This light is red now for quite some time, so I assume it will turn green soon. You see the car on the right? He's approaching the end of the queue too quickly and needs to stop. Whereas we only need to reduce the speed to around 14 kilometers an hour, and now we can re-accelerate. This saves a lot of fuel, as it requires way less energy than if we had to start from zero.
We're coming to the end of this fuel economy test with the Jeep Compass plug-in hybrid with empty battery. And when we stop the car here, at the same spot where we started, we see 6.0 liters per 100 kilometers. And now the analysis. Well, let's have a look first at the details of this trip. You see the sectoral and overall consumption of our trip with the Jeep Compass. I've already done 2 more tests of PHEVs for Ecodriver, plus many more for my German channel, Ecofahrer, which will be translated and uploaded to this channel over the next few weeks. If we compare the results of this trip with the 2 other ones, the Ford Kuga, Ford Escape and the Hyundai Tucson, we see that the Ford is miles ahead of the other 2, which makes me think why this is. Because if you look at the weight, it's within 9 kilograms, 20 pounds. The size and form is pretty similar, so what's the difference? Well, let's have a look at the gearbox first. The Ford has a CVT gearbox, which allows the engine to run at its most efficient point most of the time, whereas the Tucson and the Compass have 6-speed transmissions, and that means the engine is outside its most efficient area very often. But more importantly, let's look at the engines, or better, the engine size. 2.5 liters with the Ford and 1.6 with the Tucson, 1.3 with the Compass. You see a relation between engine size and fuel consumption here? The Ford only produces 112 kilowatts, 152 horsepower, but its size allows high torque at lower revs, and it also runs in the Atkinson cycle, which is more efficient at high loads, lower revs than the regular Otto engine, which is designed to rev up high and have a maximum power, although at the cost of higher consumption and less efficiency in the mid to high load area. If you compare now the Jeep Compass with the Ford Kuga, we see on the uphill we had roughly the same consumption, 13.2 versus 13.5 liters per 100 kilometers. However, as I mentioned earlier in the video, the Kuga charged the batteries partly on the way up, so that allowed the Kuga to go over the hills without the combustion engine running. So you see, we didn't use any fuel on the hills because we produced energy beforehand, whereas the Compass used just a little bit less on the way up, but then the combustion engine had to run all the time, or most of the time, over the hills. But that already indicates the efficiency, but the differences in efficiency between those two. And on the descent, we didn't use any fuel. But the next difference comes here. You see, on the open road section of 19 kilometers, we used on average 1.2 liters per 100 kilometers with the Ford and 4.5 liters per 100 kilometers with the Compass. And here as well, I said in the video that the Compass didn't produce enough energy on the way down, or way less energy than other cars, than other plug-in hybrids on the way down. And with the Ford, if I remember correctly, we had 8 kilometers of additional distance gained on the way down, whereas with the Jeep it was only 3. And those 8 kilometers allowed us to cover large sections of the open road, especially those sections through the villages, with the electric motor, whereas with the Jeep this wasn't possible because there was not enough electric capacity in the battery. On the motorway we see here 6.1 liters per 100 kilometers with the Jeep. The Ford charged the batteries and still was only at 4.9 liters per 100 kilometers. And in the city as well, with that little bit of energy produced on the motorway, that allowed us in the city to use only 3.4 liters per 100 kilometers, whereas the Jeep with the empty battery used 6.3. And that then leads to a difference here from 3.7 versus 6 liters per 100 kilometers with the Compass. So 6 liters per 100 kilometers is not too bad if you compare this to a non-hybrid Compass. However, in the world of hybrids there are more efficient ones available. I want to say here that I'm only looking at the efficiency of the drivetrain, and this is by no means a judgment of the car itself. It's a nice, handy car, it's very quiet, it runs smoothly, it's practical, so if you like it, go for it. My aim here is to show that every model can be driven more or less efficiently, and also how to do this. I'm not here to prevent anybody from buying the car they like. And one more thing, I want to make sure that I say this: charge a plug-in hybrid as much as possible. If you have the chance, plug it in and charge it up. That's way more efficient than using the combustion engine. This was done for this test only, and personally I plug in my hybrid almost all the time and try to use as much electricity for driving as possible. If you want to see how this car performed on the electric range test and what range we got out of it, then you find the link up here. Down here you find the link to the playlist of consumption tests with PHEVs that I've done already, and if you generally like what I'm doing, then you can subscribe this channel over here. That's been it for the Jeep Compass. Thanks for watching, take care, and see you next time.